University, custodian of a rare handwritten copy of the journal. The October 11, 1492 sighting was not an isolated occurrence. Over the 2-month journey, Columbus's log exhibits a consistent pattern of cryptically reported peculiar incidents, including unexplained sightings and unusual events in outer space. The following is from an entry on September 10, 1492, the halfway point of the voyage.
The crew of the Nina stated they had seen a garaho and a water wagtail, but these birds never go farther than 25 leagues from the land.
From an entry September 11th, 1492.
Saw a large fragment of the mast of a vessel, apparently of 120 tons, but could not pick it up.
Entries on both September 17th and September 20th indicate that stars or other unidentified lights in the sky are seen to move.
The cause was that the star moved from its place, but the needles remained stationary.
And from the infamous entry of October 11th.
The admiral, at 10 o'clock that evening, standing on the quarterdeck, saw a light. Calling to Pero Gutierrez, he told him he saw a light and bid him look that way, which he did and saw it. The admiral again perceived it once or twice, appearing like the light of a wax candle, moving up and down.
Is it possible that these strange events, recorded during the most fabled nautical journey in history, were the result of otherworldly vessels tracking Columbus's fleet? Some suggest, however, that any interpretations or rationalizations that might be gleaned from Columbus's log are not the whole truth.
If Christopher Columbus saw a strange thing come out of the water, fly around his ship, and then take off, would he have told anybody about it? They'd have locked him up in the brig instantly. The guy's crazy, because things can't do that.
One of the earliest U.S.O. reports comes from 329 B.C. After witnessing what he described as shining shield-like objects flying into and out of the Jaxartes River in India, Alexander the Great was so convinced that he witnessed otherworldly vessels, he spent the final 6 years of his life searching for evidence of these objects in a diving bell, believed to be the world's first submarine. Some conclude, however, that Alexander's underwater adventures had a greater goal, finding and conquering the one kingdom that had eluded him, Atlantis.
Well, Atlantis first enters literary history in the philosophical dialogues of Plato. These are the Timaeus and the Critias.
The gods, bothered by the attitude of the Atlanteans, decided to destroy Atlantis. In one day and one night, they destroyed it with a cataclysm, and it sank.
To this day, researchers continue to speculate about Atlantis as a hub of U.S.O. activity.
The legend of Atlantis definitely is based on knowledge, probably lost by today, of some secret underwater civilization.
Atlantis's supposed location in the Mediterranean would have provided USOs a convenient position from which to monitor human civilizations and their shipping routes to and from Asia Minor, Rome, and Athens.
The Mediterranean was the cradle of ancient civilization. The Phoenician traders traveled back and forth between the Middle East and Greece across the Mediterranean. If there were a culture of either aliens or original inhabitants of planet Earth who wanted to seed the planet, to seed humanity with myth, the Mediterranean is a natural base for them to set up an underwater facility.
Well, I don't know if Plato was talking about unidentified submerged objects when he came up with Atlantis, but I suppose there are people who, number one, assume that Atlantis is real, number two, that it's somewhere in the Atlantic, number three, that's buried under thousands of feet of water.
The ancient Athenians, however, were not the first to record stories of unidentified objects in the oceans. Experts believe the ancient Egyptians may have even recorded sightings in their hieroglyphic drawings.
In ancient Egypt, in the temple at the city of Abydos, somebody made an inscription, a depiction of a submarine. There was another depiction of an object that looks like a helicopter. Who made it? How did the ancient Egyptians know about it? We have no idea.
One of the earliest European cases is a series of reported English sightings in the 11th century.
One of the oldest cases I have on the site goes back to the year 1067. It has to do with this people in the countryside seeing something flaming in the sky that came down to earth, lit up the countryside, and then went up again, and then into the sea.
Carl Feint has been researching USO phenomenon for almost a decade. His internet site, waterufo.net, has an archive of over 900 current and historic USO reports. According to Feint, one of the 20th century's first cases was reported in detail in the Philadelphia Inquirer on August 1, 1904. A British cargo ship, the Mohican, en route to Philadelphia was, according to the paper, enshrouded in a strange metallic vapor which glowed like phosphorus.
I have found out recently that that case is a heck of a lot more detailed and scary than originally shown. The captain and the crew confirmed that an object came across the ocean, a cloud, approached the ship, and it was glowing. Not a meteor, going straight down. It's coming across the sea. As it came towards the ship, the captain was trying to distract the crew to get them to do something different, and get over the fear. They couldn't move anything while the cloud was around the ship.
The Inquirer further reports that during the event, the ship's compass revolved with the speed of an electric motor, and the sailors were unable to raise pieces of steel from the magnetized decks. The story goes on to quote the Mohican's Captain Urquhart, who confirms that the account is vouched for by every man of the crew. But perhaps the most astounding USO-related event, according to experts, is a Canadian case from 1967.
The Shag Harbor case is the most important USO case in documentation. The UFO moved underwater to a different point. A second UFO joined it.
Coming up, we visit Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia on the 38th anniversary of this crucial USO incident.
On October the 4th, 1967, that's where the lights was, right behind me on the water.
Years ago today, October 4th, 1967, approximately 20 after 11 in the evening, something happened in Shag Harbor that became quite memorable in later years.
The night of October 4th, 67 has become known as the Night of the UFOs among many UFO researchers. The Shag Harbor incident has become the best known aspect of that night.
Chris Stiles and Don Ledger have spent the past decade researching the 1967 Shag Harbor USO incident. The case, widely reported throughout Canada at the time, had been largely forgotten in subsequent years. Their 2001 book, Dark Object, reopened the case, shedding new light on the many reported USO events of that night and the weeks following.
The reason that the Shag Harbor incident came to the forefront and kind of eclipsed the importance of the other sightings from the Night of the UFOs is simply the fact that it's the one case where something came down out of the sky and crashed into the water. You know, it made a noise, it made a flash. It's also unique in the sense that nobody reported a UFO. Several calls came in very quickly to the nearby Royal Canadian Mounted Police Detachment, and those reports said simply that people had seen lights, or perhaps an aircraft had crashed into the waters of what they called the Sound. The interest and the concern was totally for the possibility of survivors. Nobody reported a UFO.
I'm not surprised now that I had seen something in the sky that night, because all over Nova Scotia, the night of the Shag Harbor incident, there were many UFO reports.
Just up around the bend, we'll be coming into Shag Harbor, and the site crowd gathered and watched whatever it was that happened here 38 years ago today.
Each year, Ledger and Stiles make an anniversary trip to Shag Harbor to meet with Norm Smith, one of only 3 surviving witnesses.
See the island out there?
That's where it all took place, right off there. That's where we seen the light in the water.
Hey, sir. How you been?
Good.
Wow.
How are you?
Same old, isn't it?
The three of us stood on the lawn watching the lights. Eventually it started going, it looked like it was moving to us, and then on a downward slope towards the ground. We thought it was a plane crash, so we jumped in the vehicle in my old man's car and my uncle's, and we went up to this spot right here by the Irish Moss plant. And when we got here, there was probably 10, 12 other people. We watched the lights on the water for a period of 2 or 3 minutes, and then the lights disappeared.
What happens next is indisputable. Before midnight on Wednesday, October 4th, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers who witnessed the event from the shoreline searched the water on boats until 3 a.m. with the help of several local fishermen, including Norm Smith. At noon on Friday, October 6th, Canadian Navy divers from Halifax arrive and search the area through the weekend.
Eventually, 7 divers were dispatched from the Fleet Diving Unit in Halifax and taken down to Shag Harbour. The search effort continued through all the daylight hours of Saturday and Sunday, and by Monday morning that search was officially terminated in Ottawa. And they just simply state unidentified flying object and circle it and underline it.
According to government reports, the object travels from the south to the north along the Nova Scotia shoreline. At one point, it stops and hovers. Then at approximately 11:20 p.m., it enters the water at a 45-degree angle, 300 yards offshore.
Directly behind me where we seen the lights, right at Bomb Portage Island, directly behind me.
When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that had responded to the call arrived at the shoreline of Old Highway number 3, the UFO was still moving upon the surface of the water. The object also appeared to be leaving a trail of dense yellow foam.
In the weeks following October 4th, the story becomes even more mysterious. The case is front-page news across Canada, and as Ledger and Stiles report in their book, in the days just prior to the Canadian military's official classification of this incident as a UFO event, a second craft enters the waters of Nova Scotia to rendezvous with the first craft.
Then this thing resumed its headway back down this way at about 4,400 miles an hour and came down through northern New Brunswick, straight down over the Bay of Fundy, across the southwestern tip of Nova Scotia, across this way, and went down in the water here.
Authorities already knew the object was no longer there, that it had moved under the water and had come to rest on the seabed. It sat there for almost a week, right to the hour. And after that time, it began moving under the water to the Gulf of Maine with the aid of a second craft that was helping repair it. And the two of them broke the surface of the water and flew away out over the Gulf of Maine. Interestingly enough, there is the second report of a sighting, 1 week in Shag Harbour, of 2 sets of lights, one orange, one yellow, leaving the water and flying away.
This case continues to inspire debate and continued research into the events of October 4th, 1967.
There are a large amount of primary documents that support interpreting Shag Harbour as a crash scenario of the UFO. And in one of the paragraphs, it actually says a preliminary investigation has been conducted, and it has been discovered that this object is not the result of a flare, float, downed aircraft, or in fact any known object.
I didn't know then, back 30-odd years ago, I didn't know whether it was a UFO or what it was. But nobody will ever make me believe that there was nothing there, because it was.
Coming up, seen for the first time, video evidence of what might possibly be a U.S.O. emerging from the waters of Laguna Cartagena in Puerto Rico.
And they are coming towards Laguna Cartagena.
And later, a University of California scientist reveals that supersonic speed by deep-sea UFOs is not only scientifically possible, but likely. A region with perhaps the longest legacy of USO activity is the area around Puerto Rico. As the mysterious southern point of the Bermuda Triangle, the island has been at the center of USO debate for decades.
Puerto Rico is a hot spot for underwater UFO activity, and it seems to match the pattern of other cases